Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome. How's everybody doing? Awesome. Welcome to the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco. I'm Stephanie Singer, Director of Arts and Ideas here at the JCCSF, and I am thrilled to welcome you to tonight's sold-out conversation with Isabel Allende and Matthew Felix. We are so happy to see you. Thank you all so much for coming. This evening is special not only because of who's on the stage, but also because it marks the final Arts and Ideas program of our season. And I can't think of a more inspiring, meaningful, or joyful way to close than with Isabel Allende, a writer who has helped millions of readers around the world feel seen, connected, and transported. Before we begin, just a few words of thanks. First, to Books, Inc., our fiercely independent bookstore partner and neighbor. Yay. They provided your copies of My Name is Emilia de Valle, which you should have received when you entered the hall. And please be sure to check that the book that you got is in the language that you selected. A big thank you also to Jane the baker for the post-event cookie reception. Yes, it's true. Delicious cookies will be served after the conversation in the atrium. So if you came straight from work and skipped dinner, you made the right choice. And of course, thank you to the JCCSF staff and board, the tireless, imaginative, kind-hearted, spunky team that brings our mission to life night after night. Okay, quick show of hands. Who's here at the JCCSF for the first time? Wow. Wonderful. Welcome. It's wonderful. We are so glad that you're here, and to those of you who've been coming for years, thank you for making this place part of your rhythm. The JCCSF has been a gathering place for nearly 150 years, a home for big ideas, meaningful conversation, celebration, lifelong learning, performance, and yes, occasionally brisket. We believe deeply in the power of storytelling to bring people together, and few storytellers embody that power more fully than Isabel Allende. So tonight we're here to celebrate the publication of her newest novel, My Name is Emilia de Valle. It's a sweeping story about a woman caught between worlds. As one early review put it, quote, Allende once again reminds us why she is a literary icon. With Emilia de Valle, she gives us a heroine who is as complex, luminous, and unforgettable as the times she lives through. Isabel's body of work needs little introduction. Her debut, The House of the Spirits, became an instant classic and launched a literary legacy that now includes more than 24 books. Among them, Eva Luna, Daughter of Fortune, The Soul of a Woman, and Violetta. Her stories blend the intimate and the epic, always anchored in emotion, imagination, and resilience. She'll be joined in conversation by Matthew Felix, an author and literary interviewer whose podcast, A Journey of the Heart, explores life, creativity, and everything that doesn't fit neatly into categories. He's smart, thoughtful, and most importantly, he's done his homework. So please join me in giving a warm, sold-out, cookie and brisket-loving JCCSF welcome to Isabel Allende and Matthew Felix.
Thank you. Gracias. Did you see that, Matthew? That's a reception, you see?
What's it feel like when so few people turn out?
I know. I always expecting like 4 cats, always my family, and that's it.
And your family's not even here tonight.
No, and it's only 4 people, my family.
Yeah. Well, my sister's here somewhere
Where
from
is
Cincinnati. There she
Hola.
is. All right. And
The twins.
So thank you to Books Inc. Thank you to the JCC and Stephanie and all the folks here who are making this happen. And again, thank you. And just in case they didn't hear, this event is sold out. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you know, that might be partially at least
For
because...
you. It's for you.
Well, I mean, I know they're mostly here for me.
I know.
And I can't wait to hear the questions you have for me. Actually, let's hold off on those because I already got some backstage. But that might be also because my name is Emilia del Valle is now a national bestseller, not only in English, but in Espanol. So another round.
Thank you. Well, also, excuse me, but also in Portuguese and in Italian. I just came back from a book tour, and the last stop was Italy. Pasta and gelato. I gained 4 pounds in 3 days.
I don't remember the double chin from last time we
Yeah,
talked.
I know, but it's all here.
Yeah.
The butt.
Yeah, okay.
It all goes to the butt. Like all Latina women, you know, we have big butts.
Yeah.
There goes all the weight.
You know what? Own it. Own the big butts, right?
Well, it depends.
It depends. Okay. All right. So you just mentioned your tour. So you were in a few countries, but Spain in particular. What were some of the highlights in Spain?
A TV program that, you want me to tell the story of the TV program? No.
No.
Well,
You could tell that story. That's a good story.
Last time we saw each other was at Dominican University, not long ago. And he gave me a can of cannabis, of blueberries with marijuana. And because they are supposedly very good for sex, and at my age, I need all the help I can get. So he gave...
And her husband actually gave them to me to give to her.
Yeah.
So I was just the messenger.
Well, he gave me this thing, so that they really work, by the way, yeah? And they are legal. So I had to go to this program in Spain. The host is a very obnoxious guy, young, vulgar, and he's adored by young people. And my publisher wanted me to reach to the younger audience, so that's why I ended up at night in this program. And the guy is impossible. And so when I got there, first question, fortunately, before I got in, someone who was coming out had a dog. And dogs have something with me. I smell like a dog, so they always love me. And so I got on the floor to French kiss the dog, and that already won the audience. This is in a theater, by the way. And then he asked me, what did you bring me as a gift? Because I knew I had to be prepared for that. That is his first question, always. So I said, well, I didn't know what to bring you. So I talked to your fiancée, and she gave me a few ideas. And he said, how did you talk to her? Oh, I called her on the phone, and Sylvia told me, she told me that there's a few things that you might need. So I brought you this book about aphrodisiacs that I wrote some time ago. And I brought you a bottle of Chilean wine, which is also aphrodisiac. And this, it was his marijuana thing. And I said, and this marijuana, which is great for sex. And he said, what do you mean? I'm a great lover. And I said, well, you should talk to your fiancé. And so it was really funny because by chance, this was not prepared at all. The fiancé was up there in the gallery. She had come because she liked my books. And so somebody said, she's there. They gave her a microphone, and he said, did you talk to her? And she immediately got in the game, and she said, yes, but it's confidential. Did you? And he said, well, what did you tell her? I told you it's confidential, but just get the book and read it. By now, the audience was with me completely. And they were throwing things at the guy. It was really, really funny.
And you went viral.
It went viral. My brother in Atlanta, a friend in Chile, saw the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's available if you speak Spanish, or I don't know if YouTube does subtitles automatically, I can't remember. They do captions or whatever, but it's really worth watching. It's hilarious. So I'm frightened being up here right now.
I didn't bring anything for you. I'm
You didn't bring
sorry.
anything for me? Well, as luck would have it, I brought something for you, but that comes later.
Okay.
So a couple other things so that's not what I was referring to, but I love that story, so I'm glad you shared that. But you got a bench dedicated to one of your books.
But that's just advertising.
Well, I know, I know. But you also put some stuff in a time capsule, I think.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
The Instituto Cervantes is now located in an old bank, a very old marble building. And it has the big safe of the banks, you know, those round things that you need two people to open.
Like in all the movies.
Like in the movies. And they kept it, and inside in the boxes, they have dedicated the boxes to certain people that they offer the box. And they say that in that box, you can put something that is your legacy to be opened in 100 or 200 years. And so it's very interesting, and I didn't know what the heck to put in there, no? I don't have anything that is worth the trouble. But I had the honor that my box was next to Cervantes. Now, Cervantes died 500 years ago, so what can he put in there? I mean, it's all bullshit, the whole thing. But the mayor was there on the TV, and you know.
And what did you put in there?
Well, a few fake things.
A few fake things?
Yeah, well, a manuscript that I said was the original of the House of the Spirits.
But it's not. Okay. So, spoilers, I guess. For those of you who are going to be around in 100 to 200 years, you just ruined it for them. So Spain is somewhere where you have a long history of big life-changing milestones, both wonderful and tragic.
And some bad, yeah.
But let's start with the wonderful. You were born in Peru, born in Peru, spent most of your childhood in Chile, exiled in Venezuela. Venezuela, of course, is not only where you had 17 car accidents, which they probably all know. That's right, 17 car accidents.
Well, you know what, when I told him that, I explained that I'm a terrible driver, and I have two dogs, two mutts, and when they get in the car, they get so nervous that they fart. And so he sent me by mail a box of gas thing that you...
Gas X. I sent her dogs Gas X. And you said it's helped,
It
right?
helps. It helps a lot.
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
But Venezuela, of course, is also where you wrote House of Spirits, which has already come up a couple times. And yet, despite Peru, Chile, Venezuela, your literary career actually didn't start in Latin America. It started in Spain, specifically in Barcelona. Mm-hmm. So how and why is that where your career actually ended up starting?
Well, because I wrote The House of the Spirits in Venezuela, and my mother sent the manuscript to several publishers that she knew in Argentina, Uruguay, and in Venezuela, but not in Chile, because in Chile we had the dictatorship. And there was silence, not even a rejection letter, nothing. Mm-hmm. And then someone who was passing by, an Argentinian writer, said, "You need a literary agent." I didn't know that literary agents existed for writing. I thought it was for sports and movie stars. Mm. And so he gave me the name of Carmen Balcells in Barcelona, who was really the person who created the boom of Latin American literature. She found these fantastic writers, all male, and created this boom that took Europe by assault, really.
Right.
So she called me a month later, after I sent her the manuscript, and she said, "This is a good book, I'm going to have it published, but everybody can write a good book, the first book, because it's about them, about their story. The writer is proven in the second book and the books that follow. So keep writing, but don't quit your day job, because very few writers can support themselves." Mm-hmm. And that is absolutely true. And the other thing that she said that was prophetic, she said, "You're a woman. You will have to do double or 3 times the effort of any man to get half the recognition and respect." Mm-hmm. And that's the way it has been.
Mm-hmm. And here we are 30 books later and 44 languages later, right? So clearly, you quitting your day job.
I did quit my day job at one point.
Job, right?
Yeah.
So Carmen actually died about 10 years ago, September 2015. And at the time, you wrote a really moving tribute to her in the Spanish publication Clarín. And in that, you noted that, quote, "She believed in spirits, karma, zodiac signs, and other mysteries. She felt comfortable in magical realism. Maybe that's why we understood each other so well." Now, I've heard you differentiate repeatedly between magical realism, which you're known for, and fantasy. And you usually say that, fantasy is something that doesn't exist yet, right? Like it's an invisibility cloak. Whereas magical realism is something that seems magical but that we can explain, such as indigenous people in the Amazon painting their bodies, camouflage, and then moving stealthily so that they're not seen, so it seems as though they're invisible. Yet, in House of Spirits, Clara exhibits telekinesis. She moves things with her mind. She also exhibits clairvoyance. In Emilia del Valle, at one point, Emilia has an out-of-body experience. She has visions, and she experiences her intuition so strongly it leads her to do something completely unexpected. And so those things, we can't explain those things rationally yet. Telekinesis, clairvoyance, even intuition, right, to some degree. So my question is whether magical realism is actually the opposite of how we've described it. If it's actually an implicit acknowledgement that just because we can't explain something doesn't mean that it's not real, and that we sometimes do experience what might be considered magic in the real world.
Now I'm totally confused. Did you understand?
Is there magic in the world?
Yes, there is magic. That's a summary.
You need to pay attention, because this is going to be a long interview.
I was paying attention, but I didn't get it. Look, we all experience things that are unexplainable. Those moments when we go to a place and we are sure that we have been there before,
Yep.
or a person that we are sure we have met her before,
Right.
or a dream that comes true, or coincidences. And I grew up when I was very little, with my grandmother, who was, at that time, these old ladies experimented with the paranormal. It was in the seances. And so there were seances in my household on Thursdays. And these four crazy women would invoke the spirits of the dead. Mm-hmm. So I grew up with the idea that it was a possibility. I never saw one. But on the table where they invoked the spirits was a massive Spanish table that has a carved foot with 4 lions. Mm-hmm. It needs 2 people to move it. And according to the legend, it would jump around the room. With the spirits would move the table. I have the table in my house. It has never moved. Never.
That you know
However,
of.
Twice it has happened with different people that come to my house and they can't sit at the table because they feel incredibly uncomfortable. So why does that happen? I have a friend, my friend Pia in Chile, who sees the dead before they die. So she can see a person and knows that that person is going to die. And that is very scary. And I said, please tell me when I'm going to die because I want to live my death. I want to be prepared. And she says, I can't, because if I say it, it will happen. So she doesn't know if she sees it before or it happens because she sees it, which is a terrible thing if you think about it.
Yeah, and I hope she's not here tonight. So let's talk about Emilia.
Yeah.
More than once I've heard you say, nice people with common sense don't make interesting characters.
Oh, no, they're terrible.
Right. So in addition to the fact that Emilia follows her heart and goes with her gut, what about her makes her interesting?
She defies the conventions of her time. She's born in the 1800s, and at that time women had very few options. They would, I mean, if they worked, the father or the husband or a brother would collect the salary. They didn't have access to education. They couldn't do anything. And so this is a young woman who starts writing dime novels because she loves to write and she loves the gruesome stories, bloody stories of the dime novels. And then she ends up being a journalist at a time when women, if they did journalism, they would be doing festivals, flowers, social life, whatever. But she wants to do the real stuff. And she can do it, but with a man's name, with a pseudonym.
Right.
Until finally she finds an opportunity to go to cover a civil war in Chile. Why would they send a woman as war correspondent at that time. It was not done, but she manages to do that. So what I think it makes her original is that she wants to do what nobody else thinks she can.
Yep.
And she does it.
Well, and one of there are many memorable quotes that sort of give us insight into her character, and one that I love is as follows. She says, quote, "My mother never clarified what being a good woman consisted of exactly, but it seemed to be the traditional idiot who submits to rules imposed by others. One day I shouted that I wanted to be a bad woman. I was 6 years old."
That was
And I'm
me.
sure, of course, exactly. That's
That was
exactly what I
me.
was going to say. I'm sure you didn't draw on your own experience when you wrote that. So point being, early on we know that Emilia is going to be her own person. And what about her name? What is so significant about her name that you made it the title?
Because she writes with a pseudonym, with a man's name.
Right.
And so at one point she says, no, my name is Emilia del Valle, and you will use that name or for whatever I write. And she achieves that, but it takes a long road to get there.
Well, and the point at which she achieves it is something you just mentioned. She goes to report on the Civil War. And so the Civil War is very, very central to this book. So can you give us a little bit of context about the war and what was going on, kind of the...
And why I was interested in this.
Yeah.
In 1891, we had a civil war in Chile that has echoes or similarities with what happened in Chile in 1973. In 1891, we had a progressive president, Balmaceda, who wanted to bring big change to the country and try to help the underprivileged. And of course, he faced great opposition of the landowners and the owners of the mines and the rich. So at one point, the Congress was in the opposition, and the armed forces intervened, and they divided. The army went with the government, and the navy, which in Chile is very powerful, went with the opposition. And the result was a horrendous civil war that in 4 months died more Chileans than in the 4 years of the war against Peru and Bolivia. And they killed each other savagely. And then in 1973, 80 years later, we had a progressive president, Salvador Allende, who wanted also to bring change to the country and faced great opposition. In this case, again, the armed forces intervened, but they did not divide. And the result was a military coup and 17 years of dictatorship. So I saw these parallels, and I thought, well, this is a very interesting time. Also, it was the end of a century, a really important moment. And I always think of the situation of women in a certain time. I have written several historical novels, and I always tackle the event from the point of view of the ones who are defeated, who don't have a voice, the poor, the women, the children, and sometimes even the animals. What happens with the horses and the mules in a battle? They die. What happens to them?
Yep.
And so those are the aspects of a historical event that I'm interested in. Because history is written by the winners, who are most of the time white males.
Right. And we're going to talk lots more about some of those themes. But something else I want to bring up now that distinguishes Emilia is she does not ascribe, we're talking about how she's unconventional. Well, she also doesn't ascribe to the sexual norms of her time. And to the contrary, despite being raised by an ex-nun, she actually embraces and explores her sexuality. But she also...
Well, she has the good luck of having a good lover at a very early age.
A good teacher.
I totally recommend it, huh? Totally. Because
Yes.
then you can teach the husband.
And she ends up doing some teaching.
Yeah.
But she also opens her
Most
heart...
men need teaching, a lot of teaching.
Yeah. That's so weird. I didn't expect that to resonate. You know what I mean? That's so weird. But she also opens her heart to love. And when at one stage she actually falls in love, she observes that, quote, "I cannot say if it was a feeling that sprang forth in that moment or if it was something that had been latently brewing. Our relationship had been so practical and easy that neither one of us had ever interpreted it as romance. And so that made me sort of wonder, does love have to be, or do we expect it to be, difficult?
No, but passionate. We expect it, not difficult, but we expect it to just be like an explosion. I mean, that's the way I have experienced love. Well, that was when I had some hormones left. Now it's not at all like that. But
Get out the blueberries.
I have, yeah, well, a lot of them.
Yeah, a lot of them.
But you know, the fact that the love evolves slowly, the friendship evolves into love, that's less usual, I think.
And we can't experience love without making ourselves vulnerable. And on the subject of vulnerability, you recently commented on the Spanish podcast, Estirando el Chicle. You said, what makes you vulnerable are the secrets that you keep, not those that you share.
No, because my mother was always worried that I exposed myself too much in my memoirs, in my interviews. I say everything. I don't have any problem with my own life. And my mother was always horrified. And I told her, what makes me vulnerable is the secrets I keep, not what I say.
And how is that the case?
Because the more you expose yourself, the less they can blackmail you. I mean, what can they say?
So you were tired of being blackmailed.
Of course.
Yeah. So something that's currently vulnerable in a different way, in the sense of being under threat, is democracy here in the United States. And at your press conference in Madrid, you were asked not once but twice about continuing to live in the US as a Latina immigrant, given what's going on, how immigrants are being targeted today. So what is your response to that?
It depends. Look, I have started from scratch a few times in my life, and it is very hard. I know what being a political refugee and being an immigrant is. And it's not easy. But when you're an immigrant, most of the time you choose where you go. You are young, and you go there to plant your roots and raise a family and be part of a community forever. You don't look back. When you run away from a place, like I did in Chile, you're always looking back. You have the keys of your house in your pocket. And dream that one day you will go back and that key will still work. And that never happens. And then you have to start in another place that you most of the time have not chosen. And life is very hard. At that time, I was young. I was 30 years old and I had little kids. So it was harder because I had to raise my kids in another place. But now that I'm 82, I think, would I start from scratch again in another place? If necessary, I will, but I don't want to. It has taken me so long to have a peaceful place that is like my refuge, where my dogs are, my husband, the husband first. Where I have my husband and the dogs and my son and the dogs. So I don't want to start again, but if things get as bad as they could, I will have to leave before I'm deported.
What about natural-born citizens? Over and over we hear people, when there are a particular election, we hear people say, if so-and-so gets elected, I'm out of here, right? And usually, they're making threats on which they don't deliver, usually. But we have seen some cases, obviously. There was just New York Times, I think it was an op-ed or an article, I can't remember. 3, was it Yale University experts in authoritarianism talking about why they did just move to Canada.
Yeah.
Of course, there's some celebrities we know who have done that, and lots of people who don't make the headlines who have done that. But you left Chile because you were on a list. You were targeted. Short of that, when a country is sliding towards authoritarianism, how do you know if or when to
I
go?
think that when you start living in fear, fear is such a powerful thing. And there was a point when I just could not live in fear any longer. And that's why I left. And sometimes the fear is very personal because you feel that you can be arrested, that your children can be tortured in front of you, that you can disappear. But and other times, the fear is like a feeling in a country. And when an authoritarian government is established, the repression becomes targeted and very efficient, and you can see it. And then also is a time of fear that I would not like to experience again.
Right. Well, when she's reporting on the civil war in Chile, Emilia describes the president, who already mentioned, Balmaceda, as, quote, authoritarian, to be certain, but he believed in the institution of democracy and had respected the Constitution, until, that is, he decided to interpret it his own way. And so I was struck by that pairing of authoritarianism and democracy.
Well, you have to think of the time, because in the late 1800s, the idea of democracy was not what we have today. And people talk more the republic more than a democracy. So they would say, we have a republic, and we were proud of our republic. But the idea of democracy, as we understand it today, was not so common. First, because most people couldn't read and write. The differences in social classes was so appalling that there was not really a middle class or a unions that didn't exist. So how did people vote? They voted whatever the landlord said that they should vote. So everything was corrupt. In essence, was corrupt.
On the Chicle podcast, you said, quote, in the United States, no one knows what an authoritarian regime is because they haven't lived it. And so there's a flirtation with the idea because they don't suspect how it is. In your experience as someone who has already lived it, what does it take for people to wake up to what's really going on and get, oh, this is happening now?
I think it's a critical number. We are very passive. We think, well, it's not that bad, it hasn't touched me. But then one day it does, you or your neighbor or your family. And there is a moment when there is a critical number of people who resist, of people who are against it. And then you feel it very, very clearly.
Yeah, I think they've quantified that as 3.5% or something, I think was the number that was getting bandied about with the no kings, who knows. But yeah, that notion of critical mass. So one of the most difficult aspects of what's happening politically, not only here, but elsewhere in the world at the moment, is the cruelty being exhibited. And as Emilia experiences more of the war, not surprisingly, that becomes one of the most central and powerful themes of the book, right? She says, she's reflecting on what she's seen, and she says, quote, so much cruelty and death was unjustifiable, absurd, a sinister game played by the men in power. How is it possible that from the dawn of their presence on earth, men have systematically set out to murder one another? What fatal madness do we carry in our soul? That propensity towards destruction is the original sin. Is it simply man's nature to be cruel? Is there no way to overcome it? Is it really a fatal madness?
I think that we are naturally very savage. And we have created a wonderful system, a moral system, that is religion, democracy, laws, agreements that to live in a civilized world. And as long as we respect those agreements, we sort of maintain this cruelty and savagery and brutality under control. But given the wrong circumstances, it emerges in the most awful ways. And because I study history, I see it over and over. And then we whitewash it when it's our nation. So we don't want to admit what happened in Abu Ghraib, what happened, the massacres in Iraq. Those things with the press and us, we don't want to know. But it's there, you know, and if it's allowed, it can happen. That's why power with no accountability is so dangerous. I wrote a book called Island Beneath the Sea, which is about slavery. It's about the slave revolt in Haiti at the end of the 1700s. And I wondered, why on earth would I write about this? I have been in Haiti only once. There were no plantations in Chile. We never imported African slaves. It's not in my culture. Why would I care so much about it? But I trust my instinct. I feel that if I want to write something, it's because it's important. I'm exploring something about myself. And then when the book was finished, after 4 years of struggle with a terrible subject, I realized that the book was about power with impunity, the power of the master with a slave, life or death. And I've always been afraid of that. Long before the military coup in Chile, I already had that feeling that if you have power and you're not accountable, you can do anything. And what you do is terrible most of the time.
Right.
And you see it in the police, you see it in a drunken father, you see it in the authority in general. Everything can be corrupted when there is no accountability.
Right.
And our tendency is toward savagery, unfortunately. So the fact that we can have ideals, that we can be have moral rectitude, that we can be decent, is a fantastic achievement. And it's hard to maintain. So hard to maintain and to give it to our children and our grandchildren.
Right. The only thing I think that helps me get through these things and talk about these things is humor, right? And as we've already seen, a key part of your process entails including humor in your stories that otherwise talk about and tackle some very serious themes, as we've just seen. I mean, you even joke about death. At one point, Emilia's father tells her mother, quote, "People are in the unfortunate habit of dying," which I thought was pretty good, very unfortunate. And you already know one of my other favorites, which is, quote, "He wore so much cologne, plants withered when we walked by." And I think we all know a couple of those people. So, but how do we keep our senses of humor when things are so serious, whether it's on the page or in life in general?
I think that's when humor is most needed and when it happens the most. It's amazing. All the jokes that we can make about the most horrible things. I don't know in the United States, but in Chile we have a terrible sense of humor. We love cruelty. So the worse the situation is, the more we laugh. Yeah. Humor can say, and being a woman, you need humor to live in a patriarchy. Without humor, you're stuck.
Okay. Speaking of your creative process, you recently said, quote, "For me, it's easy to put myself into the role of each character. I am every character, and I can follow each character from infancy to old age because I grow with them." So what do you mean when you say you are every character?
You know, when I was very young, I wrote theater plays. And I remember the first theater play was about an ambassador that is kidnapped by some guerrillas in some Latin American country. This was happening all the time in the 70s. And so that's the play. And there was a reading of the actors around the table of my play. Everybody talked like me. Everybody was me. Mm-hmm. And it was awful. I mean, it was the most embarrassing, humiliating, horrible thing. Uh-huh. And I went home and I had to redo the whole thing. But I learned then that each actor becomes the character. Mm-hmm. Each actor really plays, even if he's 5 minutes on stage, that actor will know everything. Does this character smoke? Is he married? What religion does he have? What was the background? Does he have any siblings? All that. Even if it's never used in the play, yeah. But he needs to know. Right. And so I learned that, and I applied when I develop a character, I am the character. I want to know everything about that person.
And yet you've also said that you don't make your characters do anything. So if you are the characters and you have that intimate, relationship with them, how do they nonetheless still have some sort of free will?
Because they are all different, and I use real people usually as models. For example, let's say my best example is in Ripper, my only crime novel, and I needed a hero. I wanted someone unusual, and I thought, okay, let's make him a war veteran. I know nothing about the military, so I thought this guy is going to be a caricature if I don't find a good model. And a friend of mine introduced me to one of the Navy SEALs of the team that took down Osama bin Laden. So I traveled to Washington to interview him for 3 days. I was expecting, according to my prejudice, someone like buffed up and I don't know like a gorilla. And,
A lot of gorillas up here too.
yeah. And then I found this guy who was an expert in classical music and wine with the hands of a pianist. Completely different.
Made for a much more interesting character too.
You see?
Yep.
So at one point he invited us to his apartment, my friend and I, and the apartment was empty. It seemed it had never been used. Maybe he rented it for the interview. But I went to the bathroom. When you do an interview and you want to find something about someone, go to the bathroom and open the cabinets, because you find a lot of stuff in there, and that tells you a lot about the character. And then usually the bathroom is next to the bedroom, so you can sneak into the bedroom and take a look inside, see the sheets and what there is in the drawers. Yeah, so I came back with my character, who was this war veteran, completely formed, to the point that I felt that he was sitting next to me in the airplane. He was so fully formed. So just for effect, I amputated a leg. And, but I gave him as a compensation a war dog. And so at the end of the book, unfortunately, I had it's a crime novel. Many people die, a lot of blood. And then at the end, I had the villain that has crucified the heroine, and the hero is coming with the dog to save him. And unfortunately, the hero dies, which you should never do in a crime novel, because that same character will be in the sequel and the series. And the series, you can't kill him. Yeah. But I had to choose between the dog and the character.
So don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think many of us here will be having you over for dinner. Just kind of heads up.
You know what? Once I had a body in a trunk, not my own trunk, in a novel. I had a body in a trunk, and I didn't know what to do with the body. So I emailed all my friends, and I said, what would you do with the body in a trunk? Everybody had an answer. Everybody had some idea. And I'm sure that if I ask the audience, everybody has thought about killing someone, usually a relative.
Right.
Yeah. You would all know what to do with the body in a trunk.
Right. And it might be better if we ask them later. Yeah. Let's just ask them later. But can someone get that? Yeah. The second part of that quote touches on one of the things that I love about your writing. And this is how you so often take us on the trajectory of either decades or even, the entire lifetime of your characters. And readers clearly like that. Like I said, I love that. But what about it is appealing to you as a writer?
When I write the whole story of
when you get to write their
saga.
entire lives versus just a year of their life, or...
That's what I love about a novel. Mm-hmm. I have written only one collection of short stories, and the only advantage of short stories is that you can write them in a brief period of time, in a week or two. But a short story is a slice of life, and nothing else counts but that slice. And that has to be perfect, like poetry. And from the first moment that you sit down to write it, you have to know everything about that slice until the end, with a punchline at the end. But I don't like that. I like the tapestry of life. I want to know everything about everybody, a tapestry that you embroider with threads of many colors without even knowing the pattern. And then at some point you turn it, and wow, it looks like a story.
Right. The last thing I want to ask you about, when you're developing characters, is you often like to give voice to people who have perhaps been forgotten by history. And in Emilia del Valle, those are las cantineras. So can you tell us what about who they are, and then what about their story made you want to include them in Emilia's?
Well, a novel like this is made with questions. So by asking the questions, I start to get the story. I never have an outline. So I say, for example, okay, I'm going to tell the story of the Civil War, and I want to tell it from a neutral point of view. I don't want to take sides. So it has to be a foreigner, someone who comes from abroad. Now, who would that person be? I wanted her to be a woman. Why would a woman do it? Okay, she's a journalist. Why would she be sent to Chile? She speaks Spanish, and she has connections in Chile. So one thing after the other, you start putting together this puzzle. And then I thought, why would they allow a woman in the battlefield? And then I realized, I found out, that there were the canteen girls. At this time, in that period, war was face to face. It's not like now that you press a button in Texas and a drone kills someone in Iran. No, it was face to face, very close and very long. The battles were long, and so I thought, who gives them food, water? Who takes care of the wounded in the battlefield? There were women who did it. Ignored by history, ignored by the military documents. And these women were the mothers, the wives, the daughters that followed the regiments. And they would wash the clothes, mend the clothes, raise some chickens so that the soup will be a little better. And they would go in the battle with the canteens with water or with alcohol to help the soldiers. And if they would take care of the wounded, and if the son or the brother or someone died in their arms, they would pick up the gun and fight instead. And they were treated, if they were defeated, they were treated brutally. They were exterminated in the most brutal ways. So I thought, the only way that Emilia can go to the battle is with the canteen girls. And that's how the cantineras came into this story. But they were not only in Chile, they were everywhere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So another process question. Key to process is inspiration. You've said discipline is even more important. But one source of inspiration that you mentioned it earlier actually, are dreams. And so I'm just curious what role dreams have played in your inspiration, getting inspiration.
It depends. More than inspiration, it informs me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a dream can be very inspiring, but mostly dreams inspire me, and I used to write them down and share my dreams with my mother. There's nothing more boring than sharing dreams, but my mother's dreams were incredible. A rat was on her nipple, or the kind of dream, not to mention the dreams when she killed her husband. By the way, she always wanted to be a widow. And I would share the dreams, and then she would interpret the dreams, and that would be very insightful for me. It would teach me a lot about my writing and about my life. She discovered that I have a recurrent dream of a house, a messy house, that I have to go room by room cleaning up the mess. And I know that I open another door and there's more mess in that room. It's a never-ending Herculean task. And my mother said, that's your life. And each one of the rooms is some mess in your life or in your family that you need to fix. And it never ends.
So I think most people here probably know, if you've ever seen an interview with Isabel, you know that, speaking of dreams, you find Antonio Banderas dreamy.
Yeah.
But I recently heard a particularly noteworthy dream that you had about him. Would you share that?
That was a long time ago.
Well, but I think it's evergreen insofar as its interest.
I had a dream that I placed a naked Antonio Banderas on a Mexican tortilla. And I slathered him with guacamole and salsa and rolled him up. It was such a fantastic dream. You know, that's the most erotic dream I've ever had.
Well, last time I tried to help you with your sex life, and it seems like I did a fairly decent job. But dreams sometimes do come true.
What did he bring?
Antonio's on location, so couldn't be here. However, I'm going to give you a sneak peek, and then I'm going to open it, because it's trickier than I anticipated.
No way. that?
That is a story for backstage. It took forever. This is actually the 4th attempt, but I was like, I'm gonna do this.
Look at this.
Here we have a Mexican tortilla with Antonio Banderas.
Thank you. So look at this. God, he was sexy.
I also brought guacamole and salsa, but I think the table's a little too small, so I'll give that to you later. But Roger can thank me later. Roger's back there someplace.
This is so lovely.
Okay, you want to hold on to it?
Thank you so much. This
My
is
pleasure.
just absolutely perfect. God, he's lovely.
All right.
He was.
He was. Well,
Well,
and you can...
Now he looks like an old man.
Well, look at the photo I chose. So,
Yeah.
I had a big selection.
Can you see in the back? Yeah, so he's sort of semi-lying, naked from the waist up, with that face like this that he has.
I tried to find an alluring version. Yeah.
Really alluring.
Okay, so down girl. So in that same interview, again, I think this was the Chicle one, I got a lot from them. When you mentioned the Antonio Banderas dream, you also commented that when she was alive, your daughter Paula had a mantra. And so I'm curious if you're not curious, but could you tell us what that mantra was and how it's guided your life?
You know, my daughter lived to be 28 years old, and she was a strange person. She didn't want to own anything, and she would give away everything. So I would always be buying clothes for her. In every trip I would bring something, and she would be so grateful. 2 minutes later, she had given it away. Turn around and give it away. And her mantra was that you only have what you give. The more you give, the more you have. And when she died, one thing that helped me was that I promised her that I would live the years that she could not live, and I would try to live them like her. I would try to be the person that she was, which is very difficult, almost impossible. But that became the mantra of my foundation and the mantra also of my life. You know, poor Roger, my husband, that's my third husband. I throw away everything, or I give away everything. So he's always looking for his passport and the keys of the car and whatever, no, because probably I threw it away. But you know, when I think, why am I like this? Because it gives me a sense of safety. Some people gather stuff because that makes them feel safe. For me, it's exactly the opposite. If I have stuff that I have to take care of, I feel terribly unsafe. It's just by not having much that I have that sense of freedom and safety.
Right. And I think a lot of people...
Oh, it's melting.
The lights are hot. You might want to put it down. Yeah. Well, you're going to step on him.
No, I'm not
okay,
going to.
all right. Don't
I'm going
step
to
on
frame
him.
it.
Okay, frame it. Maybe we can put some lacquer on it or something.
Yeah, I will.
But I think a lot of your readers, most of your readers, are familiar with the passing of Paula, which you memorialized and talked about in the memoir of the same name. But something that I learned that blew me away when I was doing research is that you've, in addition to her, you've actually held 2 other people in your arms as they were dying. And in the book, someone dies in Emilia's arms. And so I'm just curious how your intimate experience with death has helped you represent it and articulate it on the page.
I wrote about death in many of my books, even before I experienced Paula's death and the death of my parents. Both my parents died in my arms. My mom was 98 and my stepfather was 103. And my mom died peacefully. And at one point she said, am I dying? And I said, yes, Mom, are you afraid? And she said, no, I'm curious and I'm content. My stepfather, on the other hand, thought that he was immortal. And he was terrified of death, terrified. So he died screaming in terror. And I was holding him like a baby, trying to tell him that it was fine, that I was with him. And suddenly he died, and I didn't even realize that he was dead because I was holding him so tight that then someone touched me and said, let him go, he's gone. And that experience, first of all, is a sacred moment, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to witness that, to be with the person you love in that moment is really important. But I have written about that in many of my books before that experience. The first time I wrote about it, it was in the House of the Spirits when Clara, the grandmother, dies, and the grandfather, Esteban, who is the patriarch, gets in the room, locks himself in the room with her, and stays with her during the night. And no one knows what happens there. But when he comes out, she's perfectly, he has dressed her, he has cleaned her, and he has shrunk. and he has shrunk in body and soul, and even his shoes are too big for him. In those few hours, everything about him shrunk. And that is, in a way, metaphorically, what happened to my grandfather when my grandmother died. He dressed in black from head to toe. He painted the furniture of the house black. Oh, wow. Desserts, flowers, music, parties were not forbidden. They didn't happen. And so I grew up in a somber house that was a house in mourning, because for my grandfather, the death of my grandmother was like the end of a lot of stuff, the end of youth, of laughter, of the craziness of my grandmother. And so I wrote it as I saw it when I was a child in the House of the Spirits.
And you talk about, your mother was not afraid. She was actually welcoming it. I wanted to see what's next. Was your father, or your stepfather, was the opposite. And you said you went one step further in addressing your potential fear or lack of fear with death. You said in your memoir, The Sum of Our Days, which was the follow-up to Paula, you share how, quote, I lost my fear of death and experienced the eternity of the spirit while experiencing ayahuasca, which a lot of people know as a psychoactive ceremonial medicine that's gaining a lot of popularity. You had already experienced death up close and personal. So how did that ayahuasca experience?
Because I felt it in me. I felt that I had died. Because one thing is when you are witnessing it, and then when you feel that you die. And it was not scary at all.
It wasn't scary at all?
Not at all. It was sort of fascinating, actually. like you want to stay in that other state, and it's hard to come back.
You did want to stay in that other state, in the sort of death state.
Yeah, it's a nothingness that also includes everything. It's very hard to explain. You are not connected to anything, to consciousness, to memory, to your affections, to your body, nothing. So you become not even spirit, less than that, air, I don't know what you are. But you are part of the whole universe. Everything is there. You are everything.
And you experience it as such.
And you experience it as such. And that was an extraordinary moment. Not everybody who does ayahuasca experiences that, of course. I was probably in a very particular mood, or who knows, because I did that with my husband number 2, and he was stuck in a bureaucratic hell. He was a lawyer, and he was stuck in a place with documents that he had to read, and more documents, and more documents. and he was desperate. I mean, it was a hell for him. Yeah. While I was in heaven.
So, we're talking about death. You've commented how it's taboo to talk about death in the States. You've also commented that a big part of aging is letting go of this youthful notion that we live forever. As a society, we obviously do have problems with that. Sort of the poster children for that right now is there's a lot of tech bros who are spending a lot of money on living forever. I think we talked about somehow we mentioned a blood transfusion a minute ago. You know, there is the fellow who was actually getting his son's blood transfusions, getting transfusions of his son's blood so that he could live longer. He founded a conference, Don't Die, which of course is also, I'm sure, about wellness and other things. But even the title just kind of bluntly says, you know, we would love to live forever, a lot of us. So, and that's just one example of many. But if death is as natural as birth, why is letting go of this notion that we live forever so hard?
Because it's very cultural. I think that not everybody in the world thinks that way. Mm-hmm. It's very cultural. We live in a world, in a society, in the United States, in which we think that we can control everything, and we can understand everything, control everything, and buy everything. So people like Bezos can buy it, but that's a notion that is very unique here. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it anywhere else.
Interesting. And what does letting go of that notion do for us?
Freedom, great freedom. You know, when I could let go of the idea of who I thought I should be, and that happened when I turned 80, it was like crossing a threshold to another place, and let go of so much stuff, not only the material stuff, but toxic friends, stupid things that we do for obligation, so much, you know. All the impositions that I have about myself, that I have to study, I have to be on top of everything, I have to perform, I have to work, all that's gone. And because I'm going to die. So it's so freeing. It's wonderful, in a way.
Thank you. So one last question before we get to the questions that many of you kindly submitted. In one of your TED Talks a few years ago, you said, quote, "I want to make this world good, not better, good. Why not? It is possible." So given all that's going on today, do you still feel that way?
Yes.
Okay, and why?
Yes, because I have seen the arc of evolution, in the arc of history and humanity. We don't go back. It seems sometimes that there is a backlash and we go back, that we walk in circles, but we don't. We work in a spiral. And every time we learn something and we evolve. Out of the horrors of the First and Second World War, very good things happened. I mean, I was born in the middle of the Second World War, in the times of the Holocaust, of the atomic bombs, of 50 million refugees just in Europe. There was no United Nations, there was no Declaration of Human Rights, feminism was in diapers. I mean, all that has happened in my 80 years gives me hope for the future. Of course it does.
Good. I'm a little more hopeful now as well. Okay. So these aren't really, and we went through them. They're not in a particular order. They're sort of in order, but then we kind of mixed them up. So we'll just see what comes up here.
Most of them are in Spanish.
Almost all of them are in
Spanish.
Spanish.
Spanish here? Oh my Lord, we should have done this in Spanish.
Deberíamos haberlo hecho en español, que tampoco es demasiado tarde.
Yeah.
Tampoco es demasiado tarde.
Wow.
I think the Spanish speakers who had to suffer through our English, now the English people need to, or the English speakers need to suffer through Spanish, right? Okay, esto dice, siempre sabes cómo terminará la historia. Do you always know how the story will end when you start writing?
No, I never know. I don't have an outline. And I like open endings because I think they are, well, or tragic endings. You know, tragedy gives gravitas to the story. Happy endings are just for romance novels. But open endings nobody likes. People want closure. They want to know what the heck happened. And so with Emilia, I had an open ending. And the open ending was Emilia goes to this lake in the south of Chile, and gets on a boat and disappears in the fog. Look how poetic that is.
Very poetic.
In a movie, it would be wonderful.
But I wanted closure.
I know. So that's what my editor said. And I started asking around, and everybody said, that's like a metaphor of death. So my husband was making an omelette, and I said, he doesn't know what I'm writing because he doesn't speak Spanish, and he doesn't read my books anyhow, even when they are in English. So So I said, what do you think of a woman that goes in a boat in a lake and disappears in the fog? Depressing, he said, write an epilogue. And so sometimes you need an innocent eye. And so that's how the book ends.
All right. Well, so you just told them the ending.
Well, they are not going to read the book.
They're not going to read it anyway. No. Okay. When writing historical fiction, how do you make sure your work is unbiased in its telling of history?
Well, that's like journalism. It's always biased.
Yeah.
Because you are a person, you have certain ideas, certain sentiments, certain experiences, and you are always looking at reality from the perspective of the person you are. But in a historical novel, because it's something that happened in the past, you have more distance to judge and to see what's going on. That's why I wanted a neutral voice to tell the Civil War. If I would tell something that is happened today, it would be very difficult to have that distance to judge. But I know that I'm always biased. Mm-hmm. I'm always for the underdog, for the poor, for the defeated. That's where I stand.
Yeah. What is the most challenging facet of writing a novel?
Sitting down. Sitting down. You know, for some people, it's get the idea. But to have an idea of writing a book is having an idea of climbing the Everest. Unless you do it, it doesn't happen. So to do it is difficult because for most people it's a side job. Few writers can make a living. So they have to steal time from their day job and their many other obligations to write.
Right.
And that is challenging, that's difficult.
Yes, it is. In current times, and we've already touched on this. I don't know if you want to say any more, so I'm going to read this one. In current times, what parallels do you draw or are able to infer from Emilia's story?
In Emilia's stories, what is the most striking thing, I think, part of the book is the terrible violence of the Civil War. How people who are from the same nation, they look alike, the names are similar, many of them are even relatives, they are related, can kill each other that way. And they don't even know why they're killing each other. It's usually for some abstract idea that has nothing to do with their lives, really. And often, in the case of this particular time, young men were drafted. I mean, sometimes they were almost children. They were drafted against their will, and they would end up in the battlefield killing and being killed, not knowing why. Just because they are on this side and they are wearing a uniform that is blue and white, and then the other one is white, and so they're on the other side. But why? And so that the stupidity, the violence, the absurd idea that we have to kill each other is just what strikes me always.
Right. Unfortunate parallels.
Yeah, in the United States, more people died during the Civil War than in all the wars that the United States has had ever since. And they killed each other for ideas, it's true. But it's the same people, and that is so horrifying.
Right.
And it can happen anytime.
What can we do to help more immigrants in the current environment? And thank you for writing about strong immigrant women. You are inspiring. So what can we do to help more immigrants in the current environment?
I think that there is a rhetoric anti-immigrant, fed by the government, but fed also by political parties. And people cling to it. We need scapegoats. It's happening in Europe also. It's happening everywhere. Also in Chile, by the way. In Chile, we have had waves of immigrants, many from Venezuela. And there is a growing sentiment anti-immigrant. We see them as the other. And I am an immigrant. So I know how it feels to be on this side. What can we do? I think that when we think of, let's say, 120 million refugees in the world, 75% of them are women and children. That's numbers. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. But when we meet one person, we hear the story, we know the name. He's our neighbor. That person could be me. That child could be my child. Then everything changes. So I think that the goal of art, of the movies, of literature, and hopefully of the media, is to connect us at a human level, to let us know that the other person is like us, that the similarities that bring us together are many more than the differences that pull us apart. Mm-hmm. And just that, humanizing the other, is what changes the narrative.
Well, and you mentioned, but you didn't say specifically, I don't think, that your foundation specifically helps women and children, refugees. Are there other concrete steps like that, like giving to your foundation or finding organizations to help?
Find organizations. My foundation, when people offer donations to my foundation, we always tell them, go directly to the people who are working in the fields, and we give them the names. We have researched them. We know who they are. Mm-hmm. We know them by name. But for my job, it's not only the foundation. The foundation I can do because of my books, but when I write a book like The Wind Knows My Name, that's a story of a little girl that was separated from her mother at the border, and she was blind. And this is one of the cases in my foundation. And because she was blind, it just broke my heart. I had seen a lot of those cases, thousands of kids in cages. But this particular girl, who found herself in a country she didn't know, separated from the only person that she knew, her mother, she couldn't see. She was terrified. And she started going back in age. And she was 6 and ended up being like a toddler because she couldn't handle her life. And so writing that book, I wanted to portray what I felt when I knew the girl. Because the numbers didn't mean so much as one case. The little girl in real life was called Juliana. I called her Anita in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the humanizing is such a big
yeah, because
part of it.
Why do we go to war? Why do we hate the other? Because we dehumanize them. They are not like us. They are the others. And they are evil because they are others. It's so unbelievable that we can be so stupid.
Yeah, yeah. So let's change gears, and Maria asks, what advice would you give a mom of 3 young adult women? And she says she loves you more.
Use contraception, please. Really. I mean, a mother of 3 is a lot of work. The only hope is that they grow up. And eventually they leave. So don't despair. You will have an empty nest sooner or later.
Okay.
And in the meantime, ask for help, because alone, I don't know how you're going to do it.
Yeah. So it's not really clear how you feel there. If you had not been an author, what would you have wanted to become?
I would have loved to be a chorus girl, but I don't have the raw material. So a vet, I would love to be. I like animals a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a vet, I would like to be.
Wow, this is a long one. Okay. Cuando te acuerdas de los momentos difíciles que has vivido, when you remember the difficult moments you've lived, for example, losing Paula, by the way, that book changed my life, this person says, the divorce, or anyway, how did you overcome that? How did you survive? ¿Cómo lograste? How did you manage to leave, or how did you manage to go forward and not lose hope?
Writing. Every awful and good thing that has happened to me, I write it. I transform it in literature, either in fiction or non-fiction when it's a memoir, but I don't think I would have ever survived the death of my daughter without writing that book. When Paula was ill, she was in a coma for a year. That was like a long black night, and I could not differentiate one day from the other. The only thing I remember was bringing her from Madrid to California. I remembered the trip, but the rest, it was just all darkness. And then, after Paula died, my mother gave me back 160 letters that I had written to her during the year. And she said they are in chronological order. Read them so that you will see that the only way out for Paula was death. And I started reading those letters that I had written, day by day, and seeing, I could see what had happened, organize it, understand it, and eventually accept it. As my mother said, as the only way out. But also, I was so angry, so incredibly angry, because all this happened because of neglecting the hospital.
And they didn't tell you.
And they didn't tell me. They hid it for 5 months. And then the anger was gone, because I realized that nobody on purpose hurt my daughter. It was ignorance. It was an overcrowded hospital, underprepared staff. Things happen. It was not. At one point I asked, why this happens to me? Well, why not? Who am I that it will not happen to me? And all that I could sort it out in the writing. If I don't write it, I can't understand it, and I can't overcome. And let me tell you, after that experience, everything that has happened to me after that is like nothing. When I divorced my second husband, Willie, after 28 years of marriage, everybody said, they were commiserating with me. I said, what? I'm so happy. If I divorce, it's because this is the solution to a problem, not a problem. And compared to what had happened before, it was nothing.
Yeah.
I could divorce many times. And Roger, I'm sorry. I take it back. Take it back.
Okay, so I see this new novel has connections not only with Retratos en Sepia and Con Hijo de la Fortuna, but also Cuaderno de Maya. Do you plan to continue closing the space, the chronological space between them?
Well, unfortunately, it's not chronological. I started in the House of the Spirits with two families, the Trueba family, which is the patriarch, and Del Valle family, who is the grandmother. And that's my grandmother's family, which had another name, but a bunch of wonderful lunatics that I could use in my book. And then in time, when I wrote Daughter of Fortune, I introduced another person from Del Valle family. And then that book was chosen by Oprah for her book club. Let me tell you, that's better than the Nobel Prize. Oh, yeah. I mean, if she recommends something, it becomes an immediate hit.
Yeah.
Immediate hit. So she invited me to Chicago to be in the program, and she said very flattering things about the book. But then she said, I don't like the ending. And you see, she didn't like the ending. It was an open ending because there was this head, a decapitated head in a jar of tequila, and it wasn't clear whose the head it was. I understand. She needed to know at least the name of the head. Well, so I wrote another book just to please Oprah called Retrato en Sepia, Portrait in Sepia, to explain whose head that was and what had happened. And then of course, because I had the Del Valle family in one, it had to go to the other book too. And there, something happened there that is magic realism, because all this happens before the time of the House of the Spirit, so they are prequels, both. Mm-hmm. And in one of the prequels, Severo del Valle loses a leg in the war. They amputate a leg. And then when he appears in the House of the Spirits, he has two legs. And I didn't notice, but somebody who notices asked, how come? And I said, magic realism.
That's it. That's it.
And that was that. No more explanation.
Okay, so what message or feeling do you hope readers take away from this novel?
I don't give messages when I write novels, fiction. If I want a message, it's in a speech, in an essay, in my activism, in my foundation, but not in fiction. I think that you can ruin a novel by trying to deliver a message. Don't tell the reader what to think or what to feel. You just tell the story and let them see, let them find out.
So at the end of our last interview, I said, I shared with you how taken I was as I was doing the research, how taken I was by you as a person, and you quickly retorted, "You don't know me," which, of course is true, and yet I love you.
Thank you.
Lots of these people love you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank you for all that you have given and continue to give to make the world a better place.
We all
Isabel
try.
Allende.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.